You are listening to She Rebel Radio. I'm Lulu Minns.
And I'm Mary Lobo. Today, we are talking about shifting from competition to collaboration. And you can download Lulu's free toolkit that goes along with this series.
Competition is about winning and wanting to get to the top. We strive to be the best, have a gladiator battle with others, and with it can come a belief that we must maybe trample on others to dominate and get more than our fair share. It can be closely linked to lack, which we talked about last week on She Rebel Radio, that there's not enough to go around. And I call it a masculine-based principle. Now, Mary, speaking of gladiators, did you watch it back in the day? And did you have a favourite gladiator?
Yes, I did. I remember it on Saturday nights. I used to absolutely love it. And it was just, when it first came out, there was so much excitement around it. Do you remember? Because it just hadn't been done before, that format.
Yeah.
And yes, I looked up the lady again because I forgot who she was, but her name was Jet. Do you remember her?
I do remember Jet, and she was my favourite as well. There was just something about Jet. I think she was very feminine, and she had this
Yeah.
gorgeous jet black hair, but she would knock the dudes off the podium and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I also liked Wolf. He had the long hair, didn't he? And I think that they sometimes went into battle together, and I just loved it.
Yeah, it was, and I think it was the early 90s, which is super popular these days, as opposed to the late 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, because I remember I was like, maybe, I don't know, 11 or 12. So yeah, it was around that time. And I remember we all used to watch it. It's like we all used to speak about it, and everyone would have their favorite gladiator, and
Yeah, and
that was our weekend sorted.
Yeah, that was Saturday night sorted. And definitely the 80s and the 90s had a lot of kind of competitions on TV. The Krypton Factor is another one. And, I guess then we moved on to singing shows and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, do you remember those Stars in Their Eyes?
Yes, Stars in Their Eyes. That was hilarious.
These all British
Yeah.
programs, but yeah, and there was that was on a Saturday night, wasn't it? And there was also Noel's House Party as well.
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
Noel's
there was
House.
some good TV, wasn't there, in the 90s?
Yeah, and I think 'cause we didn't stream TV then either. Everyone used to watch it because there was just the 4 channels here in the UK.
Yeah, and everyone would have, because everyone was pretty much watching the same thing. So we'd all be talking about it, wouldn't we? Because it wasn't like we had 100 different things to choose from and everyone's watching something different. And often you'd go around to someone's house to watch it.
Yeah. And I guess the competition was twofold for the performers, or whatever they're called on gladiators, because they were competing with each other, but then competing to be the kids' favorite, the ones that were talked about in the playground.
Yeah. And yeah, everyone did have a favorite, didn't they? And everyone had their sides, and yeah, it was really good fun.
It was
It was healthy competition though, wasn't it? It wasn't.
Yeah, and I think, that, and we're going to dive more into this as to when competition is healthy and when it's not so healthy. But would you say that you're a competitive person yourself?
I don't know, that's tricky. I don't necessarily think I am massively competitive because I don't sort of put myself in situations where I'm competing against different people, because I've always tended to be sort of like this lone wolf character who I've always sort of done my own thing. So I'm not necessarily in a situation where I'm competitive, but if I was in a situation where I had to be competitive, then I would find it in me. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't want to lose anything, but at the same time, I'm happy to let other people win if they're better than me.
Yeah, and I think it's around that. I don't seek out, competition and stuff either. And certainly as a child, like I absolutely hated team sports for that reason, because it's not that I'm competitive with myself, as you said, as a lone wolf. But I used to hate team sports. So as my best friend, she loved team sports, and she's super, like, even if you play crazy golf with her, she gets ridiculously competitive.
Yeah, so when you say competitive, those are the kind of people that I am thinking about, the people that throw over the Monopoly board and walk out of walk off a pitch or whatever because they're annoyed. I'm not that person. But then if I was in a group and we were fighting to win something, I'd be giving it my best shot. But at the same time, I'm not a sore loser.
No, 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 me neither. And particularly with things that don't matter. I do love to win a board game, but again, I play properly and I won't have a fit if I don't
You're not a
lose.
cheater.
No, oh no, I can't stand cheating. And if you're playing Monopoly, you've just got to have a strategy. And again, it's kind of competing with myself in terms of like, do it better than you did last time, rather than,
Yeah.
the people that you're playing with. And when
Well, it's that time of
adults,
year again, isn't it? With
it is,
Christmas coming up.
yeah, and even adults that like compete really badly with kids and then they can't stand it when they've lost against a child. I'm like, what is that about?
But that's real people that are really competitive. You see, we obviously don't have that in us because I think people that are fiercely competitive, like they have to win against anybody and under any circumstances.
Yeah, and any activity as well. It doesn't
Yeah.
even matter what it is. So, what was it like in the world of journalism?
Oh, right. So that's a perfect example because I found that really tough actually because in the same vein, like I love collaborating and I like working with people and I like building ideas with other people, but I'm not cutthroat. So I wouldn't try and I don't do one-upmanship or I'm not trying to be better than somebody else or hope that someone else's idea fails. And with a lot of in that world, I did see there was quite a lot of like backstabbing, and that I found that very uncomfortable. And I wasn't, I'm just not built for that.
No, I find it was definitely like that in the world of criminal defense lawyers as well at times, and I found it super exhausting if
Mm.
and again I was competitive myself of trying to be the best lawyer that I could be and
Mm.
the best representation, and I guess there was a certain degree of competition in making our department really solid and having a large client base as opposed to other firms. But there was a line and I wouldn't cross it and I wouldn't stab people in the back and I would
Yeah.
be upfront and honest about stuff.
Yeah, which actually in the in journalism and in the world of um criminal defense, honesty doesn't tend to be up there, does it?
It's
With
not a top value for most people, no.
yeah, exactly. And that's probably why we both sort of carved our own paths because I would say that being authentic and being genuine are two sort of qualities that we both really value in each other and in ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And the kind of cutthroat that I saw and watched from outside, particularly the guys, setting up firms with each other and then stabbing each other in the back. And,
Yeah, I can't
literally one of them
stand that.
thought they were going to get sent to prison before because of perverting the course of justice. This is no joke. And, the other one was like, yeah, we're going to get all his business. And then he didn't get sent down. And then they went into business together. And I was like, how can you be that? Like, oh, we're going to have all his business. And now we're business partners. I just couldn't get my head round the cutthroat
Yeah.
competitiveness of that.
Yeah, and also the lengths that people will go to.
Yeah, it's super crazy. It really is. And that's one of the reasons I call comparison a masculine based principle, because those worlds of legal practice, litigation and
Mm.
journalism, it started, men created those worlds. And
Yeah.
often men really do like to win. And they're taught
Yeah.
from a young age how important that is. And I don't know if you notice, and I know you've got a daughter, but with a lot of little boys, they can be like, look at me, I've won. They want you to
Yeah.
see them as the best of something from quite an early age. And as I said, not all of them, but the kind of the stereotypical boys tend to gravitate
Mm.
towards that need to win.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've obviously, as you say, I've got a daughter, so I don't. You've got more boys in your family, haven't you? I don't see loads of boys other than my daughter's friends or my friends' sons. But
Although I would say on that, my two older nephews are really not typical boys in that scenario, so I don't actually include them. But
but yeah, I would definitely say with my daughter, as soon as she feels that there is that she's being pressured or that she feels that she's being sort of pipped against someone else, she just doesn't isn't interested.
Yeah.
So she's probably got that from me, actually. Her dad's far more competitive than I am.
Well, and I noticed a bit of it in Morocco, actually, because there's much more of a gender division and a much more traditional life in many respects. That and we did a lot of driving around from one place to the other and a lot of people watching, as well as the landscape. But I noticed like groups of young men or boys together and groups of young women, they weren't mixed, like you get here, for
Yeah.
obvious reasons in terms of religion and things like that. But the boys were all like pulling each other about and it's very
Mm,
physical, and then the girls were sitting there, and there's a degree of socialization here as well, but sitting there, chatting and almost,
mm.
collaborating and planning. And
Community.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I was like, so interesting watching those different behaviors. So do you think as a result of that, and many of us as women are not so attracted to team sports, again, not all, do you think because of that our relationship as women is different with competition?
I
And
don't
can
know,
that
because I mean, I've met some women who are fiercely competitive, but then interestingly, they would probably be described as quite masculine in their behavior. But
mm,
it shouldn't be like that, should it? Like women can be competitive. It shouldn't be like it's not a male or a female thing. I just think it's character. Um, but maybe as women, we're sort of taught to be more supportive of each other. So there's less of us who are fiercely competitive to the detriment of other females.
yeah, and I think when I say a masculine based principle, and I talk about collaboration being a feminine based one, we all have masculine and feminine energy, but it's interesting in terms of that socialization. And I sometimes wonder where we as women can be more competitive to up level ourselves in business and things like that,
Mm.
because we tend to worry more about the impact that we're making, the change that we're creating, rather than, competing with our competitor down the road and doing better, in inverted commas, than them.
Yeah, and I think as well, maybe women feel like they need to safeguard their place um in some roles. And maybe there's also the threat of younger women coming up underneath them and taking their roles. And also there's the issue of women wanting to have families and then feeling that they've maybe got to give up their role. So it's I think it's very tricky for women because there's more threat there to your position.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot more mentoring that's taking place within that, because I think in our day in journalism and legal practice, again, those women that had got to the top had to really embody that competitive spirit. I think
Mm,
they'd fought to get there, that
yeah.
trampled on who was necessary to get there, and in those typical hierarchical structures, there are only a certain amount of places at the top, and then they weren't always as willing to put a hand down to the women to help you come up and join them.
No, because they'd fear for their own position, wouldn't they? So and I can understand that. And I think it's different for us because we've just sort of created our own paths, our own businesses. And so it belongs to us. But I think if you're probably working for someone else and you've got to where you want to be, that threat of a younger person taking your place must be huge. I'd hate to feel that.
Yeah. And there's a beautiful book that I remembered when preparing this episode. I'd totally forgotten about it. It was written in 1972, called Hope for the Flowers by Trina Keane. And it's
Oh.
like, have you heard of it?
No, but I like the title.
Yeah, it's like a children's book, but for adults, and it's bright yellow cover. I don't know where my copy is actually, but in a nutshell, it's about caterpillars all striving and climbing on top of one another to get to the top, in inverted commas, wherever that is, because they're getting
Mm,
higher and higher, and then
mm.
one single caterpillar refuses to climb, and guess what happens to that one caterpillar who refuses to climb to this imaginary top with all the other caterpillars? Can you guess?
He goes into a chrysalis and becomes a butterfly.
Yeah. Exactly that. How did you know what caterpillars do? Yeah, and did that way before the others. So they're like squishing each other. And I do love that in terms of that imaginary top. What is that? And where is that? And what does it mean anyway? Because we see so many people striving to the top and then it's not what they thought
Mm,
it was. And,
mm,
as per the previous episodes of She Rebel Radio, we've talked about our values and connecting with that inside fulfillment instead of those outside metrics being absolutely key. And I think this book really ties into that.
And I'm guessing, I've not read that book, obviously, and I don't know how it plays out, but I'm guessing that it's also the idea of transformation, that transformation doesn't have to come, does it, by getting to the top? You can
No.
be where you are and transform and create something exactly where you are without having to get into that race.
Yeah, you don't need to take the race. And I think it ties into the quote by Oso of respect to your uniqueness and drop comparison, and then you can
Mm.
relax into being, which
Mm.
is a lot of the principles that we're sharing for this
Yeah.
series. So collaboration is what I call a more feminine based principle. And as I've said, we all have access to both. And it can really be closely associated with abundance, that there's more enough to go around. We've got our
Mm.
uniqueness and we can, collaborate with others. And do you think, as we've talked about, some of these gender differences, but we have access to both, as women, we collaborate more easily, but also what are the dangers of that?
Oh, I've never thought about that before. The dangers of collaboration. Could it be that you don't feel confident in your own ideas, and so you always need to be with other people, or working with other people is a safety net,
Yeah.
perhaps, and you don't then strive out on your own, or you don't take a step on your own because you feel like you always need the group to back you up when you could have these exceptional ideas that you just don't take forward. Could
Yeah, and
that
I
be
think
a danger?
Yeah, I think we can really hide our light in that way. And it's a real typical story for women who are
Mm,
wanting to leave, and even guys as well, at corporate positions. There's two ways that usually happens. And one is go and do consultancy of what you were doing before, or B, doing something totally different. But everyone, when they do that, they feel like they need a business partner to collaborate
yeah,
with, and and often that's to kind of hide behind as well, of like, oh, if we fail, we both fail, and I haven't failed by myself.
yeah.
And that's exactly what I did, waste a whole load of energy navigating that relationship, and having two totally different visions and two totally different sets of values that just don't actually align with each other.
It's interesting what you say also about having two sets of values, because I've I've never I've collaborated with different people on individual projects, but I've never sort of gone into business with another person, just because I've never wanted to feel like I'm relying on that person, because I know what I bring and my contribution and what I'm willing to do, but you don't know if that other person is going to do as much as you. And I just know that quite a few of my friends who have got into business arrangements with others, there's always one person who ends up doing more of the lion's share. I don't know if you
Yeah.
found that.
Yeah, no, I agree. There is. And I think some of the, because what we're talking about here for our listeners is really, the good ingredients of
Mm,
a collaboration, or a, bad set of ingredients. So having values that are aligned are important. Yeah, sharing the work properly,
mm,
is one of you going to end up doing the lion's share of the work. And within that, I would say you need a complementary set of values, but also skill sets where there's some crossover, but you're actually totally, very good at totally different things as well. So
yeah.
you find your feet, like that, and a little bit like me and you do this podcast. It's,
Yeah.
I do that and you do that. And it comes to a point you don't even need to discuss it. That's just what you're good at.
And I think that's the only way it can work. Like in any partnership, it needs to be like divide and conquer. You can't
Mm.
be both be fighting over doing the same thing, because it's just you're wasting time.
Yeah, and you might be lacking a really important skill set. You know, why bring
Mm,
someone in if your skill set's exactly the same? You need to
yeah.
bring in someone where you're lacking.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So there's that giving and receiving, and also as a warning, you know, and I've done aspects of this before, not in a real serious way, but potentially there's been impact there of you can give away really good ideas, when you're
Yeah.
collaborating. And, if you really
Yeah.
are that ideas person and stuff, and then people just take pieces of it, you do one project with someone and then they've taken pieces of it and put it elsewhere. You can be,
Yeah.
and I have done that. I've been really pissed off with myself.
Yeah. And that's really upsetting, isn't it? If you, like you said, you could be the ideas person, but someone could be more fiercely competitive. So they take your idea and they run with it. Um, and they will do that at any cost, even if they wouldn't even bat an eyelid about how that would affect you. Whereas if you and I wouldn't do that, would we? We just wouldn't steal someone else's idea. But
No.
some people just don't have the same moral compass.
Some people I've noticed really don't realize that it was not
Mm,
their idea, and they can be more
mm,
process driven as well,
right.
which means that they can articulate it better. But and I say, to anyone who's going into business, you need the visionary, the architect, and the builder. So if you're more visionary, you can lack in some of the architects, process driven skills, and that person's got
Yeah.
that. They haven't got the vision. You give them some of the vision, and then they go and run with it. And my dad's always said, as a musician, genius steals. So
Yeah.
watch out for it, because they
Yeah.
steal from the visionaries that, might be distracted with another creative project that they haven't actually got the other one out there yet.
I mean, yeah, that's so interesting that, I mean, there's so many stories, aren't there, that you hear of the people who really did the work never being credited.
Yeah. And many women,
Or,
I might add.
yes, thousands of women, and also, or not being paid, and someone else has taken the idea and they've made all the money. I mean, honestly, it just would make you sick.
Yeah. So where are we as women too generous with our ideas and too collaborative, because it can be for a good cause that someone else is kind of using your process or
Mm,
whatever. Where are you not putting your name on it or your intellectual property on it? And it's so
mm,
important, because I think it is something that we as women, particularly if there's a really good outcome of what we're doing, can give away too much in the name
mm,
of collaboration. Or we can be criticized that we don't want to have a free cup of tea with someone, and I have to be wary of that, that I
mm-hmm.
can really create change for someone within half an hour. I might feel exhausted by it and they've got loads out of it and loads of new business ideas. But then you could be, criticized by not having that free cup of tea with someone wants to pick your brains.
Mm. Yeah, that is so true. People not wanting to pay you for your time
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
expertise,
Mm.
and
And it's
people
this.
feeling that you owe them in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've, have it. And it's no disrespect to people going, oh, I loved hanging out with you. And it's been all about their stuff and how I can, give them some ideas and things like that for that. So and we have to have this equal give and take. I find it with the
Yeah.
podcast as well. I get inundated with guests wanting to be on the podcast. And
Mm,
that's, lovely. And it's a really lovely position to be in. But sometimes
mm.
I find, and it is a collaboration when someone comes on the podcast, right?
Yeah, of course. Um, Definitely, it's a dialogue, isn't it? So it can't just be talk, chat, 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 chat. I get, from the episodes I've listened to, you're not going to have someone just talking and not being in dialogue with you. But I think you've told me before that some people just want to come on and talk about themselves.
Yeah, they do. And, a prime example of this, and because we're live on the podcast at the moment, I'm getting emails and LinkedIn messages. I had a LinkedIn message, three, in fact, from someone wanting to be on. When I said there are no guest slots at the moment, I hope you've listened to the show, enjoyed it. I'll review it once we've reopened guest slots. I don't have the time to review the amount of applications that I get, and I don't have an application process, but there was no response. So I felt like you're
Mm,
not really interested in She Rebel Radio and the counter status
mm,
quo ideas and the feminine based principles that we present. It's your agenda. And already as a collaboration, that feels off to me.
mm. Yeah. Well, not everyone is as lucky as me, Lulu.
And they are not. Not everyone
Getting
has
in
had
there, episode 2.
100%. What has been one of your best collaboration projects and why?
Oh, I've got quite a few, to be honest, because I did, you know, historically lots of acting. I've directed plays.
What's a new
I
fact for me about you? I didn't know that.
Did you not?
No.
You know that I did acting.
I know. Yeah, but I didn't know you did directing.
Yeah, writing and directing. So I directed some plays. Um, did one for the Sydenham Arts Festival. It was like, like amateur. I did Still Magnolias. It was amazing. I got a group of ladies together and we actually performed it in a hairdresser's in Sydenham.
Oh, wow.
That was the scene of it. That So it was a real hairdressers and people came into the hairdressers to watch it. That I would have to say is up there with one of my best collaboration projects because all of these. So interestingly, it was an all-female cast.
But what were the elements of that made it a good collaboration?
Right. So everyone, because it was an ensemble piece, quite often all members of the cast were on set at the same time. And so, and everyone, well, for starters, they all had to do American accents. So these are all British women who are doing American accents. They've never, they haven't acted before. So they're learning the accents. They're really supporting each other, trying to build each other up, build each other's confidence to give them the strength to get out there every night and perform. And then I was working with them, as the director to build their confidence, to get to teach them the skill, acting skills, and so together it was just like this journey that we went on from, a script in the hand to actually physically creating something on stage. In the half time, we all made food for all of the audience, and then all of the actors remained in character and went around like handing out food to all the audience members, just like,
Yeah.
as if they were part of the wedding and stuff.
Oh, amazing. So it's like including the audience and collaborating
Yeah.
with the audience. And also, I think, as I said, we do that on our retreats for lunches and breakfast that everyone brings food to share and collaborate. And, just something magical happens when women come together in that space. And it's no disrespect to men or children, but I think if they were involved in that, there just wouldn't be an equal share
Yeah.
of, everyone kind of mucks in and everything gets cleared and tidied up. And also, one really important thing that you said about your play there is that the actors came in at the same starting point, that none of them had done
Yeah.
it before.
Yes.
So that's really important as well, because I've also had women coming to me who want to do something at my retreat, like, I don't know, massage or, some amazing holistic thing. And I often explain to them that if I'm going to collaborate with someone on a retreat, often they've got to come in at the same starting point as me. If we're going to both sell it and it's going to be our retreat, they need to have an audience size that's the same as mine, right? Can't
Mm-hmm.
have like 100 people and,
Mm-hmm.
on their list and I've got X or this many on LinkedIn. And that's not from an ego perspective. Again, it's that same starting point. Are we in the same energy here that we're going to both bring equally to the table? Literally the
Yeah.
food table, as we're talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I probably think that is one with that play, that is what worked, is that everyone brought to it the same level where everyone was at the same level and they brought the same. Like everyone wanted, we had an end goal. Everyone wanted to perform, everyone wanted to learn. But also, like I said, we were doing the accents and it's easier for some, not as easy for others, but we were all there supporting each other. So when someone needed a bit more, everyone helped them, that's what was beautiful about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we are nearly out of time for this episode, but I hope that we've shared some really important thought processes for you if you are thinking about your next collaboration, but also where you can bring some of that competitive spirit, even if it's with yourself, into the work that you are doing in the world. Now, please don't forget, you can download the journaling toolkit that goes right along with this series. But as always, before we go, we're going to share our 2 journaling tools.
This week, I will be the woman who lets go of competition. And I'm going to do this in a bit of a backwards way, Lulu. So just bear with me. And as a coach, you tell me if this can even work.
Uh-oh.
But because I find competition threatening, it's a little bit of a threat. I'm going to let go of that aspect of competition and try and see it more as a positive thing.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No, I think that works, because some of our listeners may have tuned in and thought, actually, I do need to embody a bit more competition and,
Yeah.
have a think about what I can do that's better than anybody else and be
Yeah.
competitive with others in that way. And, embody that uniqueness with that quote that we shared from Oso. So I think that works.
Yeah. So letting go of competition being a negative or being threatening or being something to feel is negative, and letting go of the negative aspects of competition and looking at
Yeah.
the positive aspects. That's
Yeah.
what I'm.
Perfect. This week, I will be the woman who chooses collaboration. I will do this by picking 3 people that I would like to collaborate with in 2025.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So it's amazing to have you with us and our listeners on She Rebel Radio. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Lulu.
You've been listening to She Rebel Radio with me, Lulu Minns.
And me, Mary Lobo. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you left us a review.
And perhaps you could share this episode with another amazing woman.